sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Experiencing fear is something that is common to all living beings. The flavors might be different. The reasons or the situations or the occasions for experiencing it might be different. They might be grosser or very subtle, but they're there for many of us. Earlier today, when I asked, the question on fear came up in relation to Mettā. So I'm going to try to respond and offer some suggestions. We are constantly hiding from ourselves. And to be more exact, we're hiding from our own bodies, trusting our own bodies, often fearing fear itself. Which also means that there isn't a friendly relationship there to begin with, a friendly relationship with our own bodies. We usually don't have that. It doesn't exist for many of us. And it's no surprise that for so many people, we don't even have the right words to describe the emotions, the feelings of fear, or whatever it is. It might not necessarily be fear, but just how to translate that, how to express that feeling within the body that is felt. I think the term, it's a fancy word, I think it's called alexithymia. When a person is unable to interpret, understand, verbalize their feelings. So in other words, we simply do not identify the signals that are being sent to us by the body. They're being felt, and we just are unable to understand. And we need understanding in order for us to cope with things, with life. So what the mind usually does, it taps into its reservoir of a library of terms and feelings that it is already familiar with, and starts to label. And you guessed it, oftentimes, if not always, the labels do not fit the feeling. And we develop what the Buddha termed as micchāditthi, or wrong view in life, towards our bodies, towards experience, towards life. So it is no wonder that many individuals who start the practice of meditation, or specifically, let's say, come back to Mettā, they experience some level of fear. It's like a walnut that they tried to swallow, but it's got caught in the throat somewhere. It's not going down. This feeling of dis-ease, discomfort. A very quick experiment you can do is just think about the time where you wanted to say the words "I love you" to someone. Or if you've ever said those words to begin with. Someone safe even. A friend perhaps, or even a relative, apparent. It's not always the case, but sometimes. How about a hug? Giving someone a hug. Already you can sense this sense of the heart palpitates, you're uncomfortable, it's uncertain, in fact, even perhaps unsafe territory for the body, for the mind. So many people start metta practice without having addressed these areas of one's life, one's experience of life in the body. So they are looking for some form of a panacea or some type of an ointment, a magical ointment, to take care of that, to make it all go away. The sense of fear that we all have. It's in our DNA. We have that. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourses, a person comes over one time to the Buddha and asks a very realistic question. He says, you know, I see you and I see other bhikkhus and ascetics, yogis, go and step foot into the thick jungle forest, the jungle, the woods. And sometimes I see them staying there all night and sometimes for weeks on end. It's terrifying. How do you deal with that? Have you ever experienced it? So the question is being asked as to what tricks basically the Buddha had up his sleeve. How was he able to handle that feeling of fear? And the Buddha says, well, he offers several different ways of dealing with fear. And you see this also in other suttas where the Buddha uses certain types of affirmations, reminding oneself of the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And if that or those don't work, then you can think of the Devas. And if those don't work, you can just take your mind and you bring it into your virtuous life. And here the Buddha, this is called the Bhairava Sutta, which is Majjhima Nikaya number 4, I believe. And the Buddha discusses how he compared in his mind himself to other ascetics. He says, unlike other ascetics, my resolution is pure because my heart is pure, because my virtue is pure, intact. His truthfulness is intact. His honesty is intact. He's able to see the mind. The mindfulness is not leaving him. He's aware of all these fluctuations in the mind. He's seeing the hindrances as they come and go. Unlike other ascetics who are lost in a maze of their fears, of their feelings, with the hair in the backs of their necks, they're just standing on end. And he says, I resolved that the moment fear came, I maintained my position. Whether I was walking, I stood, he says. I didn't budge, I didn't move. I completely encapsulated myself within this face-to-face contact with fear. I didn't budge. I didn't let the fear move me. I stood there and watched the fear. If you noticed, every time we have a feeling of sensation of fear, the mind, if not the body, literally wants to jump to something else. It wants to go to somewhere else. Some other object, a memory, an idea, tomorrow, a moment away from this experience. Simply not to be standing there in the waters of now, facing this situation, whatever it may be, that is generating fear. And he says how wild animals would come and feel him out in the jungle. Sometimes his mind would perceive these very non-violent or passive animals, such as peacocks, for example, which are abundant in India's jungles. They would come and walk around as they, walk on rustling leaves and things. The mind would perceive this as, oh no, something is here to devour me. I was mentioning this a few weeks ago when I was giving a Dhamma talk with IBMC, how I had a similar experience sitting there out and about with 360 open in the open air in front of a stupa, a wonderful stupa, pagoda. And I sat there and meditated. And I saw how the mind started conjuring up all these scenarios which had nothing to do with reality. I was in New Zealand and it was really, really cold. I had my beanie on, my hat, my everything, my blanket around my waist, and I had a relatively comfortable seat, all by myself. The wind was howling, blowing, and moving me. But what was even worse, it was the mind that was coming constantly at me with things, papanchas, perpetuation of mental proliferations, thoughts. And if you know anything about New Zealand, you know that it is sheep country. So I was hearing these four-legged animals around me, even though there were no sheep during the day. The mind was like, oh, there's this four-legged wild beast. And I could even hear the animal's breath. Even this is like, I could feel the nostrils just like dripping with oxygen, liquefied, just the breath. I could feel it. It was so clear. But that was not as interesting as watching the mind conjuring up all these fearsome, horrific images or feelings in the body. So for a person who's dedicated to the path or the practice, one could say, even if I were to die here, I'm going to die sitting, unmoved, like the Buddha, unmoved. If that's my lot, if that's what's going to happen, so be it. This is it. And that is one of the reasons why I mentioned how the meditation posture is the most courageous posture one could have, as long as the posture of the heart corresponds with the sitting posture. So, using one's own virtue is really powerful. When we say virtue, we're just basically talking about keeping your precepts. Are you diligently keeping your precepts? That is huge. That is extremely powerful. Today you have people who live in safety. You have kings and queens and celebrities, this and that. They cannot even keep one single precept. You have generals, you have entire leaders of countries, powerful leaders, who control millions, who cannot even control their anger. What words come out of their mouth. If, however, you are a person out of those billions who is able to be mindful of the words, of the thoughts even you're having, identifying whether they're wholesome or unwholesome, and choosing the wholesome, that is something that you can anchor your confidence and security on. Not even kings, even gods, can compare to that. Now, reminding yourself of this is crucial during those moments of fear, which are going to happen, especially when you're practicing Mettā. Because what you're doing is you're rubbing off the gunk, the dirt from the surface of pure gold. You're going to have that. But that's the process. It's not a destination. It's a process. And that's why I never am a believer that enlightenment or awakening is like a one-time thing, and that's, you got your visa, you got your pass, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about a thing. You're getting into Disneyland. You have your pass for the day. Unfortunately, for many people, meditation or the Buddhist path, especially here, even with Mettā, that's what it has come down to. Some series of attainments, which is absolute nonsense. Nonsense. The Buddha was alive. His awakening was alive. Every bit of his life was dominated, was ruled by that. He breathed that awakening, as did his students. This was a living process. This is what I understand as engaged Buddhism, engaged humanism. The Dhamma makes us truly alive. We can feel the fear, but we can look at it. We can understand it. We don't run away. We observe it fearlessly, truthfully. But to just, in order for me to give you something a little bit more tangible, something that you can apply also, which usually some teachers would say, well, this is not good for laity, for people who are not monastics. But I'm not a big believer in that understanding, because it's truly a wondrous technique. What I'm referring to are the 32 parts of the body, breaking it down, mentally dissecting the body. Starting with your head hair, body hair, your skin, your teeth, everything. The phlegm, the saliva, the gums, the fatty tissues, the wax, the urine, everything. See if you can actually guide your attention in those moments where you have fear. Because usually fear is, whether directly or indirectly, it is tied in with our concept and our, most importantly, attachment to the body. Seeking security for the body. Because remember, we identify ourselves as this person in the mirror when we look at the mirror. However, when you are going deep into the body, breaking it down into its component parts, the bones, the arteries, the veins, the fatty deposits, body hairs, sweat, bile, the bladder full of urine, kidneys, adrenals, the brain, tissue. See if you can mentally hold your own brain. This will require some level of visualization, yes. But what you're also doing is you are also becoming a lot more realist. Because when we are disabled, because that's what fear's objective is, to disable us completely, to unplug us from reality. The Buddha uses a wonderful term. He says, in the daytime they imagine night. They see the night as day, and they see day as night. And he was referring here to the other ascetics and yogis who would be terrified when entering the forest, or the jungles, or the cremation grounds, which is another tool. Unfortunately, we don't have that many cremation sites in the West. But in the East, in Nepal, India, Indonesia, other places perhaps also, you do have the ability to observe a human body not covered up in some cloth or in some casket to never be seen again. But you would see the body exposed, being burnt. And that's also like an assault on your senses, because you can also smell it if you're close enough. You can hear it. I was in Nepal and I could even hear the bubbling of the skin of this person whose body was being cremated, and the smell was just, wow. But when the mind sees this, this is it. There's nothing more. This is it. This is its end. Logically, cognitively, we might understand, okay, yes, we're all going to die. But many of us, if not all of us, and especially these days, are living in fear. And the fear is of fear itself. Even though we understand and know that we're all going to die eventually, but for some reason we're still holding on to this thing we call the body. So when you are looking at the body in a very detached manner, seeing all these component parts, the jig is up. The magic show is over. Because you are unlayering, layer by layer, film by film, all that you took as being real. The skin, it can get easily cut. It can bleed. It can turn into an infection. And that's just showing us how fragile it is. But we are living, it's some biologists have said it's like a miracle that we even exist against so many huge factors. I think it's 14.7 pounds of pressure per square inch. I think that's what it is, living in a sea level elevation. But if you go even lower, the pressure intensifies. And we're just talking about this Mother Earth. Even sitting in wherever you are now, there are these forces around you. There's bacteria, there's this, there's that. Inside of you, there's even more bacteria, etc., etc. So what you're doing is you're becoming more of a person who sees day as day, like the Buddha would say it. You see night as night. And as it says in the Dhammapada, you see the essential as essential. You see the unessential as unessential instead of the other way around. So all these tools are at our disposal for us to apply. Because you are dealing with your worst opponent ever. Your mind. Your biggest enemy. But, ironically enough, your mind is also needed to become your best friend. Because without the help, without the assistance of your mind, there's no awakening to happen. There's no nibbana. So how we work with the mind is extremely crucial. You can point fingers away from you for all you want. Saying, I'm afraid of you, I'm afraid of this, I'm angry at you, I'm angry at this. Always looking away. That is one thing for sure, and that is missing the boat completely. Wasting an entire life yet again. So what do? We do the Dhamma. Dhamma is a lot about doing. We do the Dhamma. The Dhamma is not an accessory. I was mentioning to a student not too long ago. It's not an accessory. It's not an add-on. It's not something extra. We need to see ourselves, our lives, as the embodiment of Dhamma. It's inescapable. It's like a fish in water. Seeing how every single move, the mind, the words that you use, the body makes, has an impact in the surrounding as well as on the mind itself. So, another reason why Mettā becomes, when we practice Mettā, sometimes it generates fear, And when we have fear, when we're practicing metta, it usually means that we become disengaged, or we start to do some kind of a weird metta, fake, one-pointed practice, which causes headaches and tension. And the best way to realize that it's happening to you is when you become very jittery. You notice that the tiniest little thing is upsetting you. What we're talking about is there is the second poison, which is dosa, or aversion, or anger, or hatred. But why? Well, this is one of the cases, one of the reasons why this occurs, is the person starts to push and force themselves to radiate or practice metta when they are not ready. So they are forcing, they're squeezing a square peg into a round hole. You can't do that. So what do? Especially, by the way, this happens with individuals who want to give or radiate metta to their enemies without even having gone over the preliminary stages of metta practice. That's a much later step when you radiate metta to your enemies. So first the work needs to be done. Now, how sometimes it's highly recommended for the individual to go ahead and meet with a counselor, a therapist, a psychotherapist, because there might be too many issues underneath. And no amount of meditation, no amount of metta practice, no amount of imposed new technique is going to make the issue go away. It's just going to delay it, put it on the shelf for a while. Metta works in conjunction with other techniques because we're not all coming from the same place, same evolutionary, spiritual evolutionary process or progress. We have different ones. We've done different things in our past for which we have to undergo certain experiences in this life, good or bad. So sometimes we have to use different techniques in addition to the metta practice. So for such individuals, I would say you need to practice metta in conjunction with your mental health work. So it's a case-by-case basis, and that's why I have a very strong position towards a person who just picks up a book or reads something or joins a group online or whatever, or even does retreats without having addressed their own issues. In conjunction with, because that's wonderful, but not by itself, together. So, the mind can be our worst enemy, but that's not why we practice. We practice to make the mind our best friend, our best companion, because with the help of the mind, awakening and realizing the path and fruit and nibbana of this practice that Lord Buddha gave us becomes possible, not without it. And that's one of the reasons why one big reason why we take the fifth precept. Not to put anything toxic, not to put anything, whether natural or unnatural, really doesn't matter. Anything that deludes, that messes up the machinery of the brain, of the mind. We do not have that indulgence. It's a sacrosanct organ, the brain. We never put any psychedelics, any alcohol, anything that changes reality, because it will also change the biochemistry, and good luck. The show's over. And your brain will never become your friend. Your mind will never become your friend because you have no 100% control over it. Some parts will be missing. There will be bugs. So we take the precepts. Each of these precepts are important. Each of them is important. We don't take them to satisfy someone else or to be good citizens or etc. They have a purpose. They're taking us from an uncontrollable, completely out of it, imbalanced, agitated mind to a mind that is unagitated, a mind that is imperturbable, unshakable. The Buddha had this wonderful phrase, which I know I've said it millions of times, akuppa ceto vimutti, unshakable awakening, serenity of mind, unshakable. So it's a treasure. We have to really take care of it, the mind. And every time we have a moment of fear, yes, it is jolting. It can even feel like it's a poison running throughout your body. But your biggest, quickest tool to come back to is not to run away, but to maintain, to remain within the lap of mindfulness and observing it. Observing it. The breathing is helpful. Doing body scans, starting with the ground up, starting with your feet, your toes, your heels, up, your Achilles, your calves, your shin, your knees, your legs, up your pelvis, your back, your entire back, your shoulders, your torso, your chest, down your arms. Just bringing, all of a sudden you're grounding yourself and mindfully separating, unlocking yourself, releasing yourself from the hold, the grip of fear. Now, depending on your own history with it, and situations you've gone through, sometimes you need to do that several times. So please be aware of these steps that are available for you. And I will stop here and open for questions. This was important, that's why I wanted to hit several different things. But any questions, comments, critiques, thoughts?
Oh, okay, sorry.
No worries.
It was a wonderful talk, thank you. I just, there was something that I was a bit unsure about. I don't know if I followed it correctly. But you went from talking about not moving, like as the Buddha's advice was, and then the next thing you said you were talking about breaking down the body into its parts. So is that a part of the actual practice of when you're encountering fear, or was that something else?
Oh yes, good question, because I was talking about a few other things, a few different things. Yeah. So one of them in the sutta I mentioned from Majjhima Nikāya, the Buddha mentions how he stood his ground. He didn't run out of the jungle. Because that's what happens with monks. Even like in Thai forest tradition, for example, Dhutanga monks who are known as really gung-ho type of monks, sometimes they run. Because it's natural, it's normal for a human being when you are completely alone and you have all these sounds and things and your own mind playing tricks on you. Even if it's a frog next to you moving, jumping, that's enough to, imagine that it's a dragon or something. So that's one. I was referring back to the fear and dread, or Bhaira Bhairava Sutta, Majjhima Nikāya number 4. But the other one, the 32 parts of the body, that's a different technique altogether. But sometimes, depending on the agility of the mind, the mindfulness practice of the individual, and the intensity of the moment, because I'm not there, we're not there with this person for them to feel comfortable. Sometimes holding themselves in that one space, standing, might actually be too much. They're unable to, or there's more sounds, and it's from multiple directions. So yes, it's a different meditation practice, but I like to have several different tools in my toolbox, always ready, handy for me to use any moment, because I know how tricky my mind is. And so we have to be agile and think on our feet, if you will.
So can I ask like just a bit of a quick follow-up question? So when we are, because I know that you know already that like fear is something that I've faced like quite a lot throughout the course of my life. I have actually realised that quite often the thing that we're scared of and the fear itself is actually the same thing most of the time. It's like as if like fear is just like scared of itself basically, you know, and just like you say, starts running around in your mind. But what I'm wondering is, when you're not moving, is the Buddha then advising like Satipatthāna basically to be observing how it feels on the body? And yeah. Okay.
Yes. I'm nodding. But he chose to say the standing. He chose that posture instead of the sitting, because when you're sitting, you might, not feel so moved to move, if you will, as you would if you're standing, because you have a little bit more of an urgency to quicken your steps, to get yourself out of it, etc. So I really like the choice that the Buddha made in having just selected this standing posture, because it's really difficult, very difficult to do. But he was talking about himself before becoming the Buddha. And he had all of his 10 paramis. Let's not forget that. And he still had these emotions arise given these situations. So again, you can pick any of the other postures, but I really would doubt that a person could recline on the right side and practice Satipatthāna when there's an alligator approaching. So, yeah. But usually fear arises when the mind has these tendencies, these train of thoughts. And that's one of the reasons why I like to ask questions from students, to pinpoint and highlight and become aware of what was the thought preceding this thought, or this experience, or this feeling. What happened before that? What happened before that? And as they're doing that, they're practically doing the 32 parts of the body, but they're doing it with the mind. They are taking apart these Lego pieces that were standing for like a monster. So you're taking the monster apart, and all of a sudden there's no monster. There's just some bunch of Lego pieces in front of you. But in order for us to take it apart, we need to stop and we need to concentrate, if you will, become focused and do the work. We can't do that without being mindful, on solid ground of mindfulness. So that's what I would offer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for tying that up.
Of course. Any other thoughts, questions? Yes? Russell.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I had a kind of a technical question on the bodies, on the mental body scan, because fairly recently I had to get some other kind of scans with X-rays, CT, and those are kind of mechanical.
Uh-huh.
So I was wondering, in terms of the mental body scan, if you do it from the feet up and then you go to the different parts, what do you call out the name of the part, or how is it? How do you actually do it?
It's as monastics, we do it. We're actually while becoming ordained as a bhikkhu, the individual, the preceptor, the teacher, he gives us at least 5 of the Pali words for them. So what I mentioned earlier: head hair, body hair, etc., etc. But I like to keep it free-flowing. I'm very organic. You've seen that, and you're giggling. So I try not to do it in a linear fashion, and it changes from one time to the next. I mean, Sometimes you feel you might want to do it from the ground up. But I like to go more to the vital organs quicker. Let's say I'll just jump into the most vulnerable area of my body, let's say, in that moment. If I have a fear or a thought of, oh boy, what was that pain in my chest? Okay. Oh, is that fear? Okay, let's dig in. So I'll just go literally with my mind, go deep into the body, the chest cavity, the ribs, the bones, feel the wetness of the lungs, stickiness of the heart, see its movement. Having some visuals always helps. So sometimes even getting the visual for many people is too much. They close their eyes. So I don't want to add. And this is not for everyone. I have to say it again. But just to answer your question a little bit briefly, if I can, there isn't a one style of doing it. I know many monks have said it's from the top down, from the head down, but I like to go in different directions, using different axes, from the sides, in an angle. I like to see it in 3D. I've done some biology. I used to be a biology teacher, so I imagine the organs, the veins on top, etc. Well, how does this sound for you? The response that I'm giving.
It sounds kind of organic and free flowing. I'm just wondering that because one time I had to take a test in which they actually check one area to see whether it might have, say like a blood clot might have come from the leg, the venous, and then gone to the heart or the brain. But that was a very scientific way because they knew that a lot of blood clots originate in the leg, in the venous. So they did it in a very scientific way, kind of from the bottom up, kind of to the head. So the free flow thing I think it's good for most of the time, but you don't want to miss. You might think that you're feeling pain or suffering in one area, but actually it may be from a hidden area that you just neglected. So sometimes the manifestation where the pain is might not actually be the source.
Yes.
Like a lot of cancers, they say, oh, you have a cancer here, it's manifested here, but we're not exactly sure whether it actually originates here or actually from another part of the body. So that's why I guess maybe a combination of the free form plus keeping in mind that there might be other areas that I'm not paying attention to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I remember when I was told, I was taken to the emergency room because they discovered big chunks of blood clots in my leg and further up. And they said, it's a miracle that you survived for 3 months walking with these things in you. So I gathered as much information as I could. I was there fully alert when they were doing, the radiologist was using the echo. I was looking and asking questions, and I took that information with me. Later on, I constructed a drawing of my body, of my leg, and all the potential possibilities of what it would happen if it went to my brain, and also my lungs. Obviously, it's got to go there. So I started doing a lot of visualization, also with the blood clots to kind of demolish it like a laser. So using the mind is really helpful to do internal body scans and not wait for some radiologist to show you an X-ray of your body to you, and where you can become intimate with your body through that means. Why can't I use my own mind to probe the body? I think we can all do that. How much we're willing to do that, that's a different story. I think it's a fun way of detaching our attachment to the body. Detachment of our attachment, I think it might be. Because we're so inundated with feelings of well, I have to keep the body healthy, especially now. I think the world needs to do the 32 parts of the body meditation, because I don't want to get sick. I don't want to, of course we have to take certain measures of hygiene, etc., but ultimately the body is going to die. Okay, let me understand it. Let me understand the fear of losing it, without being a metaphysical or esoteric about the whole thing either. Yeah, I think fear can turn us to become more intimate with our bodies in a good way, and understanding our own mortality in a healthy way. I think that's what the Buddha was saying when he talked about the 32 parts of the body. He was not creating automatons or robots or indifferent entities called bhikkhus who practice 32 parts of the body meditation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Oh, KK, you had one.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just thinking about a lot of my own students who have a lot of fear, and usually those students have had like trauma, maybe abusive parents, maybe bad experience with a boyfriend, a guy, and some have existing mental illness, but they cannot afford, I know that the best solution is that they see a psychiatrist or therapist. But for instance, the case of the student with mental illness, the most important thing for him is actually to sleep, because he couldn't sleep. And I said, there are all kinds of things, melatonin, whatever, that can help you sleep. He said, you don't understand. I'm afraid to sleep because of nightmare. So the thing that would help the student is exactly the thing that he feared. And then sometimes either they cannot afford financially or they're stubborn. They just refuse to seek other help. So in terms of the body scan, do you think it would help people with these trauma? And in this particular student case, he also had very abusive parents who beat him up. So it says, I just feel really bad that he just would not sleep for days just because he's afraid to sleep.
Yes, it's a very unfortunately it's a common occurrence nowadays. I've had several patients. I think I might have mentioned in the past where I was working, trying to apply the manual version, what they had given me at the university while I was studying to become a psychotherapist, manual version of mindfulness practice and how to apply mindfulness as an intervention. That's what they're called, interventions in the field of therapy. Unfortunately, none of them were responding the way that I wanted them to respond. And by the way, just to kind of give you some idea as to the type of symptoms that these individuals were suffering from, there was abuse, there were sexual trauma that had been consistent for years since childhood. So and anger and all kinds of oppositional defiance, etc., etc. Now, fortunately, I was working with a supervisor at the time when I was at school, and she gave me the free rein. She's like, I said, listen, I know mindfulness. I'm a teacher of mindfulness, but that goes outside of this manual, what it teaches me. And she's like, I trust you, you go ahead. And I said, I'm going to go back into the Buddha's teachings. Do you mind? And she was very open-minded, and she gave me that green light. And I just went and applied the Sila Samadhi Panya. So I went they didn't have to know that they were practicing Buddhist principles. But I helped them to become more cognizant of their thoughts and the words that they were using to themselves and to their bodies. Emphasis on the body. So this led me to, actually this was my dissertation for my doctorate. It was on mindfulness of the body and trauma. So, in answer to your question, what your student is doing is the opposite of what we would recommend as clinicians, as responsible clinicians, I might add. Meaning, instead of running away, which is sleep is, and in fact, he's reached a point where even that, he's become immune to that tool, that escape, because now he's experiencing nightmares. So obviously the cure, if you will, the treatment of it is needed to be in the wakeful state. And the best emphasis of that is what the Buddha did, bringing it to the body. So, which is what I did. I didn't invent anything. I just brought it back to a psychotherapeutic setting, the Buddha's teachings. So, for example, there's one, I can actually send you the link to the work or even the chart. I made a drawing of how to do the exercise, basically the grounding, mindful grounding. So the person stands up. I can just say it out loud so people could hear it also, whoever going to listen to this later on. So the person is in a very neutral position. The palms are open. They're laid to the side. They're just standing neutral. And they look down to the left foot or the right. It doesn't matter which one to begin with. And they tap the foot twice. Touch the ground with tapping it twice. And they say, "This is my left foot." And then they look to the right foot and they do the same thing. Tap it twice and they say, "This is my right foot." And then they move back to the left. They look at the ankle and they say, or maybe move up the heel a couple of times and tap the ground with the heel. They say, "This is my left heel." Same with the right. And then go up slowly, sliding the awareness, the scan, if you will, upward and upwards until they have covered the whole body. This is my left hand, this is my right hand. And then they have to point, they take the hands, the fingers, and they bring it towards the chest and they just gently touch the body. And they say, "This is my beautiful body." This person, one particular person I was working with, they were so damaged. First of all, they stopped halfway. The fingers reached, and 2 inches before they reached their chest, they stopped. They couldn't touch their body. And the second one was very interesting. The second thing that occurred, this person could not say the words, "This is my beautiful body." Do you remember what I was saying about us being disconnected from our bodies and feeling? Because the brain has been so damaged, the associations of memories with the body has become a tool or a gateway to pain, to suffering, cause for fear. So the person needs to disengage themselves from this old narrative. And with practice, oh, by the way, there's part of the practice where they point with the left hand to one side, to the left, and they say, "This is my past." And they look towards the right palm and look towards the right, and they say, "This is my future." And they say, "This is the present," pointing towards the body again. And they say, "This is the present. Where am I? I am here." And they say, "This is my beautiful body in the present." So what you're doing technically is, and by the way, I had patients who only came in twice after that, after applying this. The results were remarkable. I stopped being their therapist very quickly. So they improved so well. I was amazed because I was looking at the technique and I'm just, wow, almost moved to tears. Especially with that one person. In the 5th or 6th session, I was not bringing it up, the technique. It was always up to her. And then she said, "Can we do that thing with the body?" I didn't bring it up, she said. And then she stands up, and I was mirroring her to give her that sense of safety as well. And she says, "I'm going to do it," which was wonderful because I was the one who was guiding it vocally, etc. I said, "Please, So she starts, and I'm following her, and then she gets to the finger part pointing towards her body. She touched her chest with her fingers. But that was not the kicker. Half a millisecond later, she says, "This is my beautiful body." I still get goosebumps. I still get emotional for that. So the healing is there, and it's amazing that 26 centuries have passed and the Buddha's teaching is alive and well. I wasn't making anything new. It's there. It's all in the Satipatthāna. It's in the Brahmavihāras. I was simply a conduit for the Mettā, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekkha to be there. When she became startled, agitated, I had to bring in Upekkha with my voice. Allow her to kind of be in the present, in the safety of that space. And understand when she was speaking about her pain, giving her a lot of compassion. And I was also joyful with her, which is mudita, altruistic, sympathetic joy. Her joy was my joy when she touched her chest and said, "I'm beautiful. My body's beautiful." And the whole thing was just full of metta. Again, this is all in the teachings. This is engaged Buddhism. Each of us has this. You don't have to be a therapist. That's the wonderful thing. If you're practicing metta in the right way, and you have that towards you, it's a wondrous, wondrous thing. It's life-changing.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I will send it to that student. But actually, it's more than one student. So many people have that problem. And I think, tell me whether I'm right, but I think a lot of fear is tied to distrust. Mm-hmm. So these people are so distrustful of everyone, and that's why they don't want to go to a therapist, because they don't trust the therapist. They don't trust their friends, so they have no friends. So it's really hard for these people to heal, and they don't want to tell the truth. They don't want to tell people that they are having deep problems. So I'm in some way, I feel grateful that he would tell me, but in other words, he would not tell his parents, of course, because of that. So I just feel, gee, how can I help someone who is so isolated, who doesn't, I would introduce very nice friends to him, but he just cannot get along with anyone because he distrusts everyone. So I think this is the most helpful, to just send him a video and said that, see whether it would help you. Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. And also getting a puppy or a pet is very helpful to regain that trust. And
I think it's a toy. He has a toy that he's very hugging all the time. But I don't think the parents would allow him to have a real pet. But at least he has a toy animal that he is very.
Yeah, the toy animal, I mean, it's a toy. It doesn't respond to his caressing. If it were a real dog or a cat, it would purr back and look back and lean into his body, feel the warmth. So, yeah. See, play it out. Don't, just feel it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that intimate part of your interaction with this individual about their sensitive issue, I think, which is occurring. It's more and more and more right now, so in people's lives. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? I know the time's up, but yes.
I just want to quickly mention on that child not being able to have an animal, especially on a permanent situation. I haven't been looking much in the US, so I haven't seen them, but in other countries it's very common to have things like cat cafes. So they're the sort of place where a person can go and, just like a coffee shop, sit down and have a cup of coffee. But in those places there are numerous animals that come and they crawl all over you, and you are allowed to pet them and things. So if you Google cat cafe, perhaps that person can find one nearby, and it's a very good opportunity for a younger person to start to get some experience with animals without having the responsibility of looking after them, because we don't want to give those animals suffering because they're with a person who doesn't know how to look after them. So cat cafes are a wonderful thing and a good introduction for people to, different from a zoo where they can go and look at the animals. It gives you the experience, and what Bhante said, to feel the purring after the caress and feel them leaning into you. You get that live experience, and as I said, without the responsibility. So I want to put that suggestion out there for people to Google cat cafe and other animals. I know there are cafes with other animals, and would be a good introduction for those children and adults as well.
Wow, great suggestion. I didn't know. It's great. I'm going to recommend that to people. There you go, KK. Perfect. Just researching it is fun. Now I'm going to go ahead and look it up. Great suggestion. Thank you. Well, if you have any other questions, Damadina, I'm going to ask you to send the chart of the mindful grounding step-by-step guide to KK and whoever would be interested. Yes, we'll send it to the group, whoever. We have emails, and if you have an email that you haven't shared with us, please do so. We can make sure that you get to be sent out one as well. Otherwise, we'll just go ahead and share some merits. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired, for the achievement of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Be well.